Let's talk about the rise of the KKK, their root and origin, and why it is important to frame things properly and correctly, to be honest. So I see a lot of people saying things like, oh, well, the KKK started as Democrats, or the Democrats founded the KKK. That actually isn't true. The KKK was started by conservatives, and it's really complicated. And this has been debunked by numerous agencies, including AP News right here, who debunks it, saying the KKK was not formed by Democrats. So if they weren't formed by Democrats, then who formed them? So starting in the early 1900s, following Reconstruction, as we started building towards the Civil Rights era, the Southern conservatives, who were part of the Democratic Party and were affectionately nicknamed the Dixiecrats, decided to take a hardline stance on any policy that would allow equality in the United States. Now, we first see this pushback from the Dixiecrats during the passage of the 1935 Social Security Act, which was the first welfare policy in the United States. It had 3 elements to it. We're going to talk about the Social Security element and how people were allowed to be, use it. Were allowed to claim it. And so when FDR pushed this forward as part of the New Deal, the Southern Dixiecrats are on record as saying they would rather all of their people starve than see any Black American get the benefits of Social Security. So, to compromise and to get it passed, FDR added the following language that is still part of the Social Security Act today. The Social Security Act then was amended to exclude certain people from being able to collect benefits, and those people were anyone in agricultural labor, not the farm owners, but the people who worked on them, domestic service in a private home, as well as casual labor not in the course of the employer's trade or business. So if they hired someone to do yard maintenance or something for them. Who do you think primarily held these jobs in 1935? Who do you think was the maid or the butler or the farmhand in 1935? And then it passes this all off to the states to determine if someone working in those jobs actually qualifies for benefits. So that way, if there was an actual white person working as a farmhand or a maid or butler, they could get Social Security. And as I said, that language is still in there, and it's still part of the Social Security Act today. And this was added for the Dixiecrats, the Southern Democrats, the conservative Southern Democrats. And this all comes to a head in 1948, where they put forward Strom Thurmond as their person to be president, and they lose. They only carry 4 states, and they lose the presidency because they were wanting to try and stop, any more progressive policies from coming out. And the passage of the 1964 and 1965 Civil Rights Act only further cement the fact that the Southern conservatives are never going to win a major election again. So they decide to try a new tactic, which is infiltrating the Republican Party. And this leads to a major change in thinking. So this is where we start seeing people like Lee Atwater saying things like, hey, in the past, you could use racial slur, and you were good, but you can't say that anymore because it hurts you. Because unlike today, there were progressives, moderates, and conservatives in both parties. Now, the Democratic Party was primarily conservative, and they had some progressives and some moderates, primarily conservative. The Republican Party was primarily progressive, but they had, some conservatives and some moderates. And as a segue, we can see this earlier in U.S. history where Theodore Roosevelt ran for president again because he felt the Republican Party had become not as progressive as they should be. But back to the Dixiecrats. They decide that they are not going to win another election nationally under the Democratic platform. So they began to side with the more conservatives in the Republican Party. And over time, they become conservatives. They become Republicans, rather. So Strom Thurmond is one of those. He was a Dixiecrat, and he becomes a Republican. He changes his party affiliation to Republican. Now, this makes the more progressive members of the Republican Party uncomfortable because they do not want to be associated with people like Strom Thurmond. And so then we start seeing this back and forth where people leave the Republican Party to join the Democrats, and people leave the Democrats to join the Republicans. This is called the party realignment. And the Dixiecrats began to use the KKK to spread their messaging about this shift, about how they're going to realign and move into the new party. And so what we find is moving into the civil rights era, as the KKK became more active, they began convincing people they should join the Republican Party. And everywhere that they were active saw an increase in Republican voters. Because words matter, that's why I say they were conservatives then, just like they're conservatives now. They haven't changed their ideologies. They just changed the party in which they enact those. They took advantage of the, fluidity of the time, infiltrated the Republican Party, and made it more conservative to align with their conservative views because they knew people would vote for Republicans. And we see this culminate with the election of the devil himself, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan ran on some progressive ideas like gun control and on pro-union values. And the minute he got elected, the first thing he did was destroy the unions in this country. He shut down a strike about the air traffic controllers, and he handed over the control of the National Labor Relations Board to the corporations and took power away from the unions and unionized workers and made it harder to unionize in the United States. That's why the election of Ronald Reagan is considered the end of the party realignment. So yeah, words matter. We need to stop saying, oh, it was Democrats and now it's conservatives or now it's Republicans. No, it's conservatives and it's still conservatives, because the people on the right, the people who are passing these false narratives, they don't care about historical accuracy. They want to just say, oh, see, it was Democrats and Republicans did the right thing, just like we're doing the right thing today. No, it was conservatives doing the wrong thing, just like it's conservatives doing the wrong thing today. And that's the language we need to use because, again, say it with me, it was conservatives back then, it's conservatives now, it's conservatives all along.